Morning, everybody. Hope you're well. Welcome to yet another morning dog walk. This morning's might be a little bit shorter as the dog has brought me on a route I don't usually do. So it's a little one down the back of a field at the back of the house. So you can kind of see the hill down and over there, and those trees over there. It's where my house is hiding. And here is the dog. It was already got grass stuck to his face. So yeah, that's great. So finally, it looks like Lincoln City's... One second, Charlie, come here. It finally looks like Lincoln City's summer recruitment has kicked off. One bit of definite news, one bit of kind of maybe news. I'm going to touch on both of them right now. So first of all, it was announced that Zay Coro has signed his new deal. So that is a 2-year deal at Lincoln City with a 1-year option in the club's favour, I believe. And I find that it's, after really resigning ourselves to the fact that Sean and Pordy were going, Sean Rowan and Pordy O'Connor, I think there was a real hope that we could hang on to Zane. The point of the academy is to produce footballers. And sometimes, like Jackson Tomac, those footballers don't come to Lincoln City. They come through the academy and they'll go off somewhere else. Scott Loach is another classic example. Luke Demesh many years ago came through the youth system, had a good career elsewhere, but not at Lincoln. The idea is that we get as many players as we can from the local area, so we don't miss a Steve Sims or a Jamie Clapham or a Steve Froggatt who played in Lincoln and never came through to the club, but that we also bring talent in from elsewhere to develop as one of our own. Zane probably can be described as bursting onto the scene, I think. I was there at his debut against Chesham, where he looked really lively when he first came on. Lots of energy, probably should have been credited with the first goal were he not fouled in the build-up, in my opinion. And then obviously played against Manchester City under 21s, did come on, did score, looked lively. A couple of cameos, or a cameo towards the end of the season, a little bit less impactful, but that's men's football, a big step up. But that's what I think he stayed here for. You know, Zay Coro stayed here in favour, I believe, of Bournemouth. There was also strong rumours of Fulham interest. Those coming from sources that I've got outside the club, not inside the club, by the way. You know, I don't think it's any secret that Bournemouth were interested. So if he'd gone there, he would have gone into the 21s. And I think increasingly the route to senior football is blocked through the 21s. It seems like a natural progression. And I know at Lincoln, we've had comments in the past about not having a 21, so we can't offer the players that next step to senior football. But at the same time, as Zane Coro staying around the Lincoln City senior team, he's more likely to get senior appearances than he is moving to Bournemouth or Fulham and getting lost in the sea of 21s. And I saw a really concerning stat the other day. It's something like 95% of all Premier League academy players never play a Premier League game. I mean, it's a frightening number, to be honest. But I think that there's a realisation, again, football's evolving, and football always evolves. When you look at any sort of transfers around football, I mean, I've been doing articles on loans recently, and there was this big shift in the 2000s from short-term 2-3 month loans to season-long 6-month loans. You never really see a short-term loan now, unless it's an emergency like Joe Bursic. And I think it's the same with academies. You know, there was a big shift in the last 5-6 years, maybe even the last 10 years towards, you know, big academies, St George's Park, develop the game, all that sort of stuff, all the talented kids being hoarded. But I think as time is progressing, some of those kids are beginning to realise that regular football is the way forward. You look at Brennan Johnson and Morgan Rogers, for instance. You look at other players that we've been in for who have gone on to do really well, like Raksaki, Philemon Boudis at Villa. So they were players that we looked at. They've come through. They haven't particularly made it at the clubs they were at, but they are now much sought after. I think Raksaki is... he was the one that was at Charlton that we just missed out on. He was in the Championship last season, and now he's being linked with all sorts of Championship moves. But the fact is that they've got where they've got by playing senior football. And for every one of those players I mentioned, the stats say there's another 9 that don't make it, that just won't come through to play for this senior team. And so players have got to make a sensible decision. I think it's good news. I think I mean, obviously, we're not going to come in here and go a youngster signing with Zane's talent is bad news, are we? But I think that the critics of the academy, and people know who they are, and everyone's entitled to their opinion, but the critics of the academy would say, well, Fred, Jovan and Sean all came through at the same time. Who's next? Who's coming through next? Oshin probably hasn't kicked on as well as we would hoped. Gone off, got injured at Boston, kind of had his progression stunted. Where are the others? Where are the other young players? We've got MJ kind of going out on loan. Hayden Can came through but didn't really make it. But Alicia Huey didn't. I mean, to be fair, they did because we created footballers. Sam Long's another one. They went on to play football somewhere else and turned us a profit. So from Alicia, I think. But even so, I think with Zane, everybody's seen that potential. And I've already seen a huge number of people saying he needs game time next season. We've got to get him in the team. We've got to get him minutes. We've got to be careful because there could be an element of the Jovan Makama here where, Jovan got game time at a time when the club was under a bit of pressure. And the second he didn't perform, he was the big villain. And that's something that I think it's taken him a while to come back from. And I think Fred suffered from it a little bit last season as well. Look, Fred's goal return since he's come back from Walsall hasn't been the best. He struggled, I think, with injury, if I recall correctly, when he first came back, overshadowed a little bit by Joe Taylor's goal scoring exploits. And then this season's kind of been used sparingly. Looks like a target man, pretty big, not quick enough to get in behind. And what do people like in a striker? Well, they like a bit of speed, a bit of pace, giving defenders trouble. If they're a big man, they like to see people bullying defenders. First and foremost, you've got to get goals. So Matt Reed, for instance, if he hadn't got 15 goals in the National League season, he'd only come back with 6 or 7. Would he have been such a hero? If he hadn't got however many he got 20 odd the season before, would he have been such a hero? The fact is, those goals then brought him credit. So the title winning season, I think he scored 8 in the League Two title winning season. But he had loads of credit for the big man, because although he wasn't mobile, he'd already got that kind of goodwill in the bank. And from then on, you always found him cut a little bit of slack. At the minute, Fred has that goodwill in the bank, but he has it at Drogheda and Walsall, not at Lincoln. And I think I think that's something to be wary of with Zane. In that, is it going to be easy for him to live up to that kind of explosion onto the scene against a non-league side and an under-21 side? No, the step up to seniors is bigger. But I think, as Michael Scabala said, his progression is ahead of what we expect. And if he does get a run of games in 6 months' time, you could quite easily see somebody coming in with big money for him. But we've said that about a lot of players, haven't we? First £1 million player, was it going to be Lewis Monsma? Not now. Was it going to be Sean Rowan? Evidently not, but he still brought us some good money. Is it going to be Ethan Arahan? Well, there's no bids in as yet. So it's interesting to see what happens. But Zane signing's obviously good news. It kicked off the summer recruitment nicely. And, make no mistake, a player signing a new contract is recruitment. It's definitely a positive for the club. You can definitely class it as transfer business. It won't say transfers in. But it does, by the way, on the website transfer market, a player coming from your under 18s into your senior team is classed as a signing. So positive. I think positive news, and just a nice way to round off a spell of, a few days where we definitely lost Sean, definitely lost Pordy, which we expected. We've kept Zane. Which of the 3 would I rather have kept? Probably rather not answer that. Which of the 3 long term has the most potential to earn Lincoln City money? It's got to be Zane, because attacking players earn you a lot more money. And with him being 5 years younger than Sean, Sean was impactful on the first team, but it was always going to be doubtful whether a central defender would go for £1 million, for instance. But people don't think twice about spending £1 million on a striker, particularly if Zane comes in and scores a couple of goals early doors, 18 years old, bit of pace, bit of power. £1 million is peanuts to a big Premier League club. So I think in terms of financial, in terms of business, Zay Coro is the one that we wanted to keep. In terms of first team impact and first team longevity, we've yet to see where he's going to go with that, but it is positive that we kept one of those 3 players that were linked with an exit. So fair play to the club for getting it done. And now the ball's over in Zane's court to break into the first team. What I would say is, in our 4-2-3-1, having seen his profile, I think there are a couple of places he can play, but I can see him being really effective down the right or the left. He's got the pace, he's got all that sort of stuff. He's got the tricks, he's got great technique, and he's obviously got an eye for goal. I mean, I was fortunate. Well, I say fortunate. I mean, I went along to the Wrexham under 18 FA Cup game, and Zane just looked a cut above. And he looked miles and miles above everybody on the pitch. And there were other Lincoln players that you looked at and you went, he's done well, he's done well, he's done well. But none of them, Zane just owned it. He owned it. He looked like a 25-year-old playing with 18-year-olds. And I think that is something to bear in mind over the next few months. That when he comes into the side, he is going to be an 18-year-old. He is going to be playing with 25-year-old or older. So he may need a little bit of time. But wouldn't it be nice to get that youth player that doesn't take 50 games to get going? And that's no criticism. Some do. Sean Rowan took 2 seasons before he's earned as £500,000 or more in his transfer. Fred's still developing. Didn't really explode onto the scene, more than kind of edged his way on cautiously to stand in the corner. Jobin's exploded this season, but what's he, nearing 100 appearances, I think, already, or something like that. So these are players that have cautiously moved onto the scene that we've developed. It would be so nice for Lincoln City to have that boom player, that player that just suddenly goes woof, goes up, Darren Huckabee style, 12 starts, 6 goals, couple of million in the bag, bosh, move on. And people who say it's sad that Lincoln City have got to be talking about a player in terms of what he can earn us rather than what he can do for us. That's football. Zay Coro goes for a couple of £1 million, and we're set up to just take that step to the next level, aren't we? What we don't want, of course, is a Ricky J. Jones or Kwame Poku situation where, in 2 years' time, he's hot property, but people think, well, rather than paying that £2 million now, we'll sit tight and wait and we'll snap him up when he's 21 and off he goes to, St. Pauli or Cologne or something like that. That would be a real shame. So anyway, that is one. That's one in. And then there is a potential in. Now, news broke last night at Football League World that City had offered a contract to former Derby, Luton and Plymouth defender Sonny Beadley with, I said Bradley, and my dad's dog's name is exactly the same as that, but without the B, and my dog recognises it. So we've offered a contract to Sonny Beadley recently of Derby County. 33-year-old centre-back, obviously fits what we need, perhaps a little bit older than people thought we might sign. But look, our experience with Tendai last season and our experience with James Collins toward the end of last season has absolutely proven that what you do need in this side is experience as well as youth. And, for every Joba Makama, for every Freddie Draper, there's got to be a James Collins. For every kind of exciting, quick, young player, there's got to be a mentor. And Tendai obviously is well-known mentor for Jovan. James Collins probably the same for the younger strikers. Setting an example. So when you've got, even Tom Hamer's not that young, but for players like Tom Hamer to have a Sonny Beadley come in, if he does, I think he's good. 33 years old, there's a slight risk, but look, he played 17 games or whatever at Wickham last season. They trusted him as a centre half there through to the end of the season for their ultimately failed promotion bid. So we're talking League One ready. We're talking lots of experience. He was he was Luton Town's captain when they were promoted to the Premier League a couple of seasons ago. So you're still talking into his 30s, and he's captaining a team at the top of the Championship. If we get this done, for me, there are real Jason Shackle shades here. And obviously the Derby connection is there. Obviously, they having played at a higher level. Bradley not played quite as high as Shackle, but it really feels a lot like the kind of Jason Shackle acquisition. And let's face it, Shackle was outstanding for us until we changed manager. He did really well. He was a leader for us in the title-winning season. Even though he was well into his 30s, he never looked like he was fading. He never looked like he was struggling. I remember his free kick. He just oozed confidence. And I think that's Sonny Beadley. To look at him, he looks like a confident man. When you've got a neck sleeve tattoo, and it's not for me, but when you've got a neck sleeve tattoo, I don't know what it is. Something, unless you're like a 24-year-old Brazilian and you think twat. But if you're like a 33-year-old British defender who's been around the block a couple of times and you're coming out with that, he looks imposing and he looks scary. What type of defender do we need? That's important. We could talk about Sonny Beadley all day long, but the fact is, if we did sign him, nobody can judge whether it's a good signing or not for a year. On paper, you can say it's what we need or what we don't. And I think that's probably where the key is. So for me, if you were saying, is that the right profile of player that we need? Well, let's look at it. We've lost Pordy O'Connor, aerially dominant in his own box and in the opposition box. Is that Beadley? He's certainly a big, strong lad. We're looking at his aerial duels. Playing Stevenage, for instance, last season, he won more than 60% of his aerial duels. Playing Charlton in this playoff semi-final, he won more than 50% of his aerial duels. That's what you need to see. So aerially dominant, yes. As dominant as Pordy O'Connor? Question mark, but Pordy was one of the best alongside the likes of Carl Piergiani in the division last season. Absolutely stood out. Whereas let's not forget, Beadley only played 17 games for Wycombe and didn't feature too much for Derby, more due to them kind of moving on than him being not good enough. And anyone that says, well, he didn't play a lot for Derby, neither did James Collins, but look what he did when he came in for us. So I think any question marks around kind of Beadley's ability to fit in were he to sign for us are answered by James Collins. Probably you need a little bit less pace in defence, potentially. So what do we need? Let's go back to that. So what do we need? So aerially dominant, let's tick the box. Pace, well, Pordy wasn't the quickest, let's be fair to him. And when we're playing a flat back four, I had this discussion with Chris the other day. I kind of said, oh, you know, if you're playing in a three, you've got a little bit more protection because you've got your two defenders next to you. And he went, yeah, but if you're playing in a three and your wing backs are pushing on, you've got more to do out wide. And that's perhaps why you know, the observation that Adam Jackson looks more comfortable in a four than a three is the right one, because he's got more of a left back or a right back, depending which side he plays on either side of him. So he doesn't have as much of the pitch to cover. So he can concentrate on what good defenders can concentrate, heading it away, kicking it away. If we're lacking that little bit of pace, do we have it elsewhere? Well, if we were to sign a 33-year-old Sonny Beadley, for instance, would we pair him with Adam Jackson? Sorry, hay fever. Probably not, would we? Probably wouldn't. So we'd probably pair him with somebody who's got a little bit more pace. Has Lewis Monsma got that pace? Perhaps not at the moment. So it would almost certainly be a Tom Hamer. So profile-wise, I can see it's kind of what we need. Hamer's certainly going to be the kind of the mobile defender, I think. I expected Jackson maybe to be his partner with Lewis knocking about. But if Sonny Beadley were to come in, or if we are indeed looking at experienced defenders like that to come in, it would almost certainly be to play alongside Tom Hamer, who, by the way, I think was excellent when he came back from injury at the end of last season. So profile, maybe we need it. Do we need a leader at the back? Well, we've lost our captain, but who's a leader? Tendai's a leader. Adam Jackson's a leader. We've already got leaders at the back. So it's not a prerequisite, but it certainly helps. Players around the training ground, players who have been that little bit higher. It would add to what we have around the squad. So I think that it would be the profile of Sonny Beadley is certainly the sort of capture we're looking for. Also a free transfer. So it's not like we're having to go and pay a transfer fee for a player from League Two. And, you know, we've brought players in from League Two before, like Pordy, and it's worked. We've brought them in like Charles Vernon, Ali Smith, and it hasn't worked. I think there's a little less risk with a player like Beadley coming from Championship, coming from having regularly played League One football. There's absolutely no ambiguity. This boy knows exactly what's required at this level. And I think that's important as well, particularly when it's Pordy we're replacing. I think if you're fishing out a wide player, you can be a little bit more experimental, like an Adjaboy or a Kwame Poku or somebody like that from Peterborough, because what they did, they brought them from the non-league and they've got a certain attribute that you think will go in League One. But if it doesn't work, it's not the backbone. You've not, if you're bringing someone out and it's a centre back from the National League and it doesn't work, they let the ball through, or they don't show the pace, or they don't show the positional awareness, it's a goal. You get a flair player out wide and it doesn't work, they give the ball away, but it's not as critical. So I think for positions like centre half, holding midfield in particular, that kind of little triangle from the box through to the holding midfield area, you've really got to be trusting experience, or you've got to absolutely be firmly in belief of the player's ability, like we were with Ethan Arahan. So it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens. Pete O'Rourke this morning has reported that Sonny Beadley has accepted our contract. Usually Pete O'Rourke does two types of reports, in my opinion. He does the speculative 3-team rule, where 3 players are in for one. That tends to come from an agent looking to, in my opinion, looking to drum up a bit of interest, or the story gets leaked, like with Pordy. I mean, he was linked with everybody in League One. I didn't see that many linking him to Reading until it actually happened. But it was Huddersfield, it was Barnsley, it was Derby. Every man and his dog were being linked. And that for me is agent talk. When Pete O'Rourke says the player has accepted a contract, 99 times out of 100, in my experience, that player's accepted a contract and that player is moving to the team that the contract's been accepted by. So it'll be interesting to see if that's the case. Pete O'Rourke seems confident. Football League world usually are pretty good with their exclusives when there's only one team mentioned. So are we about to get our summer up and running? Potentially. One thing that's not up and running is my dog. He's down tools. It's too warm. And what that means is a carry back. If you look at that, and we'll call it the effing hill, I've got to carry him all the way back up that to those woods, those trees, which is where I live. And unfortunately, I can't do that while I'm talking to you. So we are now done with this morning's dog walk. What have we had? 20 minutes. Quick look. I can't put your comments up because they've made it really awkward for us. So Johnny Benton says, would be interesting to know how Zane ended up in our youth setup coming from a soccer academy in Connecticut. Yep, definitely. Might ask that. Steve Barton, morning. Connor Pearce, good morning, Gary. Very pleased Zane has committed his future to the club. He must see his ability to play a role in the first team this year. I'm excited how he does. Chris Keneally, the main academy man. Morning, mate. Fantastic news about Zane. Unbelievable second-year academy group with 4 getting pro deals, but I really hope people don't expect this every year. This group were a bit of a freak year. Nigel Biggs thought on the Sonny Beadley rumour. Definitely covered that. JRS Special. Bradley got piles of experience, loaned to Wycombe, played 20 games, just what we need. Keith Clifton is looking forward to Zane developing. Morning to Andy Blackburn. Keith Clifton, players are playing for longer now with sports science. Look at Jamie Vardy last year in the Premier League, 38 still scoring. And finally, Flossy Tops for me. You should put your trust in experience. And Bradley fits the bill. I think that you should definitely put your trust in a degree of experience. You've got to have a blend. I think at times we've been, over the last couple of years, perhaps caught out with a little bit of lack of experience. Sometimes if you get too many old hands, like I think Mansfield had, you get caught out by a lack of that energy that youth brings. You've got to find the right balance. If we do sign a 33-year-old Sonny Bradley, I wouldn't be surprised if any other signings that we bring in are a little bit younger. But remember, we've got a great young group. We've got players like Rob Street and JJ McKinnon and Jack Moylan and Freddie Draper and Jovan Makama and Eric Ring. Tom Hamer can almost fit into that. He's not the youngest of players, but he's certainly, sub 30. And there's a lot of others. There's some that I've obviously forgotten. And while we look at this as a 33-year-old potential signing, and you've got James Collins, north of 30, and Tendai Deriqua, that's about it. And other experienced players you're looking at, like Tom Bayliss, who's in his kind of mid to late 20s or whatever. So, and I may have got Bayliss and Hamer's and ages. They may almost be the same there. So, but we've got a decent young squad. I just think that spine now would look particularly daunting. It'd be really interesting to see what happens in the centre of midfield if Ethan Arahan goes. But we've got lots of experience, we've got lots of youth, and we probably needed to bring in another central defender. I wasn't sure whether I expected a full first team central defender or a central defender who was going to cover. But at the end of the day, I suppose every transfer we make is aimed at improving the group that we have. And I'm not talking about this group being better than last season's. I'm talking about inevitable departures like Rowan and O'Connor. So you have to then improve on the players that you have here. So would Sonny Bradley be an improvement on Tom Hamer, Adam Jackson and Lewis Monson? It'd be unfair to say on a like-for-like basis whether he would or wouldn't. I'm a massive Jacko fan. Everybody knows it. Great guy. But it certainly adds to the group and makes us better than we were without him. So with that, let's hope something happens. Let's hope the rumour is true and we get our summer up and running. I have lost the dressing room here. So he's going to get carried home. You're going to go about your day. I'm going to Bedford at midday to watch Barstool Preachers. Have a great weekend up the Imps.